here by Charles Garoun, member of the European Parliament from Luxembourg, representing the Liberal Renew Europe group. Good to see you there.
Good evening.
I'm also joined here by two exceptional women, representing, of course, the nominees. You were both nominated for the Sakharov Prize 2021 for Human Rights, so congratulations for that. Saad Akbar and Zarifa Ghaffari, welcome to Brussels, welcome to the European Parliament, and welcome to Euronews.
Thank you so much.
Zarifa, you're an Afghan activist, a politician, an entrepreneur, and back in 2019 you became the mayor of Maidan Shar at just 26, I believe, the youngest woman to do so. And according to the BBC, is one of the 100 most inspirational women in the world.
According to Euronews as well.
And according to Euronews too. And you'll be finding out why throughout the programme. We're also joined by Shahrzad Akbar. You're a writer, an activist, and also the chair of the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission, and a woman who, as a child, had to risk your life to go to school. We'll be hearing about that too. Thank you so much for joining us. And also here with me in the studio is Euronews' international correspondent, Annelise Borges, who our viewers perhaps know from her reporting around the globe, and most recently in Afghanistan, where she witnessed firsthand the takeover of the Taliban with her own eyes and filmed with her iPhone. Annelise, you'll be telling us about this experience and also about some of the incredible, inspiring women that you met along the way.
Absolutely.
So let's start then by taking a look at this clip that Annelise has put together for us, a clip that's a little bit of a teaser of her upcoming documentary called Daughters of Afghanistan. Let's take a look.
Hello, this is an Afghan girl. I'm 18 years old and I was born in Kabul City and I live in Kabul City. I would like to tell you the truth and the story of mine, which I want the whole world to know that, which I want the whole world to hear that and understand me. I'm a girl who had the dreams to be changed in society, to support girls and youth rights. And, you know, I wanted to do my best as a girl, as a social activist, so I did. I started my activities since I was 14 years old and I became the member of national and international organizations. But unfortunately, I didn't know that one day all of these dreams that I have will be ruined, will be destroyed.
We are not the women of 20 years ago. I have my dreams and I want to work for my dreams. I was going to take TOEFL exam. They're closing the center that we were taking our exam there. They're closing our courses. I don't know, they cover the women faces in our cities. They almost do everything against the women. So I'm a woman, I'm a girl, and I don't want to be controlled. I don't want to cover my face. It's my identity. Maybe I'm speaking a bit disorganized, but it's my feeling. I lost almost everything. Your independence is everything. I lost it. So I'm not afraid anymore. My life won't have any value if I just stuck in my home. It's stacking in your home is worse than being killed in here.
A teaser there from Annelise Borges' upcoming documentary, Daughters of Afghanistan. Annelise, what was it like as a woman to report in Afghanistan?
Well, it was an extraordinary experience in the sense that it was obviously very difficult to work, but it was 10 times more difficult to witness what people from Afghanistan were going through. People like Nabila, for example, the girl in that clip who now lives in Pakistan. She had to leave her home, her friends, her dreams and aspirations. It was quite interesting to be there at that time, obviously, it was much easier for me than for people who had no other way and no plans, or at least no idea of what to do with their lives after the Taliban takeover. I knew that I was going to be coming home. I knew that eventually I was going to get out of Afghanistan. It's not my home country. I don't have family there. That aside, what I witnessed was a mixture of shock and resolve. Shock because obviously nobody could believe or what was happening, and especially the speed with which that was happening. But resolve because most of the women I met kept telling me that they knew what was at stake, that they knew what could happen to them, and that they were absolutely determined to stop that, to prevent that from happening. What was at stake was them disappearing, their voices being silenced, and that was extremely touching and humbling to watch.
Okay, we'll come back to you a little bit later for more, but let's turn to our two women and hear, I guess, your personal story, how your life has changed since the Taliban took over back in August.
Actually, starting my life from childhood, as I spent my early childhood under the dark regime of Taliban, where I witnessed how brutally they were beating a woman in market just for not wearing socks. While I was going through that when I was teasing my grandma in the streets by doing some naughty stuff, maybe as a child, she was telling me that if you try to tease me more or make me angry, then I will call the Talib sitting on the car to get you to, because they will capture you and they will arrest you because you're wearing the jeans with short and short heels, so not scuff. So I have that idea. And then coming, later on, the changes in Afghanistan, the bombings, the first bombing of B-52 planes in Afghanistan, that changed everything. And then suddenly somewhere else that everything collapsed. So my life started with misery in a space of like full miserable stuff, and now it carries the same way. Just the difference is that was a moment where I still had some, I still had something that, okay, this is mine and I'll fight for it, I had some biggest stuff, but right now I have just this title of immigrant carrying it out with me all my way. So and it's so tough. It's harder. It's harder than the moment that I heard my dad has died. It's harder than anything else. So. Because it was not just a country, it was not just, coming out of a home. It was just 27 years life, living it in a place and just giving up with that. So, yeah, it was much harder than it is.
Very hard. But you're here today in the European Parliament using your voice to speak out against that injustice, just as you are. Shahrazad, tell us a bit about your personal story, how you had to up sticks as well when the Taliban took over.
Well, I think as Zarifa John was saying as well, we had to leave everything behind. And it's something that we weren't prepared for. For months, there was warnings. I lost my colleagues, two of my colleagues in June 2020, and they were targeted and killed. And many people told me this is a direct warning to you and your colleagues. This place is not safe. But every day I asked my colleagues to come to work, and I went to work, believing that although we are in a very difficult moment and there's violence every day, that we will try to find a way to a peace that will include all of us. And we collectively failed. We didn't get there. And now the country is not livable for women who want to have a public life. It's every day we hear about news of harassment of women who are protesting, abductions, arrests, torture, mistreatment. And for millions of Afghan girls who are deprived of their access to secondary education, what's that future that they're looking at? When, before August 15, there was structural inequality, there was sexism, there was a lot of difficulty that we dealt with every day. There was domestic violence. It was a very difficult place for women. And Afghanistan was one of the most difficult countries for women, even before. Now it has become unlivable.
Now it's become unlivable. Charles Garoon, sitting here in your office in Brussels in the European Parliament and discussing this extremely worrying situation with your colleagues, what are you doing and what can you do? What's in your hands to be able to help?
Well, let me say above all how deeply impressed I am when I see that people daring to walk upright are threatened in their physical and psychical integrity. I am full of admiration for what you are doing there. We as European Parliament are aware of the situation. We have understood that for Afghan people, the West has betrayed people living there. When the withdrawal took place in the last of August, we tabled a resolution inviting the European Commission and the European member states to be nevertheless active, although it's very difficult to do something, but nevertheless we cannot only be disappointed, we have to act in a certain way. What can we do? In the short run, we can deliver humanitarian aid. That's indispensable. We see that the banking system is on the ground. The economy in Afghanistan have collapsed. Almost half of the people living in Afghanistan are threatened by famine. That's the reason why we cannot be indifferent vis-à-vis these things happening there. And humanitarian aid is still possible. And I hope that we find enough actors on the ground, be it United Nations institutions like UNICEF and so on, or let's say NGOs on the ground to deliver humanitarian aid. But something must be done because the Taliban are not in a position enabling them to act in the people's sense. They cannot meet their expectations. They are not, even if they want to do so, they are not in a position to do that. They have to admit that their system is already ruined, even if it's in place only since 5 or 6 months. That's what we can do in the short run. In the medium and the longer term, we have to try to establish links with the authorities there without recognizing them officially, but the conversation channels must remain open in order to see what we can do in the longer run. Take, for instance, education. They have no means to provide education to girls and women, even if they are allowed to be in school till the age of 11 or 12 years. But even this is not possible now. We have to act through the humanitarian channels to provide an answer to the short requirements. But in the longer run, this must be part of real development cooperation. And there I must say that with the eyes of the Commission, the conditions are not fulfilled to do that.
I'm sorry, but I'm very curious about what you just said, because I've heard from many, not only the Afghan women that are here in the parliament today, but Afghans who I'm still in touch with on a daily basis. They are very concerned about the kind of help that is being provided. And please correct me if I'm wrong. They're concerned about this humanitarian aid falling into the hands of Taliban. They're concerned about what kind of control the European Union has with regards to the aid that is delivered. And also, it's a fine line, isn't it, to collaborate, to engage with the Taliban and not to recognize them as a state. How do you thread that line? How do you go down that path?
As you know very well, humanitarian aid must be impartial, must be neutral, and must be in line with the basic requirements and expectations of the people. That's what we are trying to do. We cannot say we are not ready to help even Taliban if they are in need. We have to help everybody in need. That's the impartiality of humanitarian aid, and we must act in this way. That's basic, that's fundamental humanitarian law, and we have to stick to that. We are perhaps the only member states sticking to that until today, but we have to act in this way. And then, well, what matters? The requirements and the expectations of people living there, or our principles, our basic principles. We have to act in a way that we can live with our principles without denying the needs of people living in Afghanistan. I think and I hope it's possible to do that. And we have to be more creative, more imaginative in order to do that. I do not know how situation will be in 5 or 6 months, but what I know now, in this moment, during this discussion, is that for the time being, there are only humanitarian channels open to deliver helps there. And that's the, yes, it's a new or another opportunity to underline how useful the United Nations and their institutions can be when it comes to delivering help to the people in need, like it's the case for the time being in Afghanistan.
And this morning here in the European Parliament in Brussels, as part of the Afghan Women's Days, we were hearing in the plenary this morning criticism at the international community for, quote, abandoning Afghanistan, for treating just the symptoms and not the bacteria, not the root of the main problems. So what are your main asks while you're here in Brussels, at the heart of the political seat of the European Union?
Actually, when it comes to international community, we are grateful of their involvement in Afghanistan. By their presence in 2001 and 2002 in Afghanistan, the Al-Qaeda's terrorist group's roots dried up. Situation was developed and improved. Women's rights, human rights, rights of expression, and everything was exactly granted. But it was for temporary, and everyone knew it. And we were like dreaming for whatever is the best life. But right now, like, to whom evil, like, I have a clear question from international community, especially those who are directly involved in Afghanistan's situation, that to whom you left our destiny, to those who already abandoned a nation, to those who already have a unit of suicide attacks, to those who already have been climbed too many things of human rights abuse, and they have been killed, and they have been involved with killing of 1.5 million people. They destroyed and demolished everything, the basic things of Afghanistan. And sometimes when I'm thinking about whatever is happening in Afghanistan, or whatever happened from the fall of Kabul until now, giving the Taliban platforms, stages, high protocols, so high-level protocols as we saw in Norway, taking all this to account, I'm always thinking about, trust me, we know and we see it like, once again, bringing down a flag of one terrorist group to a stronghold, another one. As we had this on Bonn conference in 2001, we dried up the roots of Taliban and Al-Qaeda, but give the flow for Mujahideen and warlords, and brought them down from the mountains and give them ties and suits and platform to do that same things and stuff. So overall, situation in Afghanistan is the same like right now, like that, actually, in my opinion. And we are really worried. Women are selling their daughters. Family are striving. People are dying not only because of hunger, but because of fear, because of the terror, because of the horrors being imposed on them. I'm really badly concerned on situation of women, especially military women in Afghanistan. When we are talking about women rights and women in Afghanistan, saving women, we are always putting this social activists, this civil workers, the previous government workers, and these journalists on the top of list. But we forgot military women of Afghanistan. The women who serve military, they are in a very big high risk. They are losing their lives, and they are in a bad situation. So what really need to be done is, let's start opening up the door of negotiations. Not only with the Taliban, with the people of Afghanistan, with the men and women. Let's listen to them. What we missed and what was the biggest problem in all 20 years ago, and starting from 2001, it was we never gave a platform to people, and we never heard them. In 2001, people of Afghanistan in Bonn Conference asked everyone to bring previous Shah, Zahir Shah, who was living in Italy, as a president or as a chair for interim government. But what international community imposed on us, it was Karzai. Yeah. So, like, going all against the wishes of Afghan people. And last, please, let's help this basic roots of the community, which are starting from that small businesses that women are doing it inside their houses, from so small stuff, so that way we can really reach the money that we are paying, that really can reach the ground of Afghanistan. Not the same way, because if we are going to focus on these big projects, as example, I will say the rice that WFP was providing Afghan people as aids packages, the same rice was sold to the market, and I was the one who bought it and distributed to 50 families, because the price was at least like a bit fine, so I could buy it and help other 50 families with that. So if we are doing to that, we will have the same problem once again, and I think it's a big mess once again.
A big mess. And Annelise, can you just remind our viewers what it was like when you were there, what you witnessed, what the people, the men and the women told you, what their concerns for the future were, and if they had any prospects? Did they feel any hope, or was it all just misery, as you described earlier?
Well, Afghanistan was in a difficult situation before the Taliban came. Let's be honest, there were many flaws within the regime of the former president, Ashraf Ghani. There were many corrupt politicians. There were a lot of problems before. But when I got to Afghanistan, it was shortly after the takeover. That clip that we saw before, the reason why there's a little audio at the start is because I was getting messages from some of my contacts within Afghanistan saying, we can't believe this is happening. Somebody needs to do something. And that was what I saw at first. There was still hope. People were shocked, but they're saying certainly the international community will do something. Certainly somebody's going to intervene. They're not going to abandon us after all the investment, after all the energy that they put here. And that was the one message that I got everywhere. And people were very vocal about that message. They were very keen to speak. The men, the women that I saw queuing up in front of the banks to try and get some cash, to try and buy some food for their families, those who still had some cash in the banks, that is, they were desperately trying to communicate that the situation was very difficult and that they needed the world to do something. That lasted, I would say, a month. And then the situation started to change because the backlash against them was very concrete, very real. We saw the Taliban taking measures, or at least some members of different groups claiming to be part of the Taliban, taking very cruel measures in terms of physical aggression against those protesting in the streets. Then we saw, obviously, and I'm only talking about what I saw in big cities. You were talking about the fact that Afghanistan is not only Kabul. or Mazar-e-Sharif. There are small villages and towns, and it's very hard to get to those villages and towns. So I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about what I saw in Kabul. The backlash was very real, very serious, and very harsh. And so people started to close off. They were very worried about surviving. So when I went back to Afghanistan in November, I already saw something very different. I saw entire families crawling up inside homes, scared, hungry, cold, and they had no desire to speak. They had much bigger concerns about whether or not they could survive that week, whether their young son would not be beaten up in the streets because he was wearing jeans. And I'm not talking about women, because the women are not necessarily going out the same way they used to. As you said, any woman today in Afghanistan with any kind of desire to have a public life is very scared of doing so, because they have virtually disappeared. So what I saw initially, right after the takeover, was very different from what I saw a couple of months later, and is very different still from what I'm hearing now from the people that are still stuck in Afghanistan, because again, I am part of the lucky groups that can go in and out. That is not the reality for the majority of Afghans who are still there.
Well, let's ask Shahrazad. Maybe you can tell us how how your friends are doing, how your family that are there, like what are their day-to-day now looking like? What is it looking like?
Well, there is a huge humanitarian crisis, and there is a huge liquidity and banking crisis as well, which means that members of my extended family who are teachers haven't been paid for months. And so people who could afford to actually have food for their children now have to worry about that, and now have to, people who haven't had to queue up in a line for food assistance for 20 years are now queuing up in lines to get food assistance. And then the situation for human rights defenders, for critics, for ordinary citizens who dare to criticize Taliban or try to hold them accountable, it has changed dramatically, especially in the last 1.5 months. Initially we saw a trend of extrajudicial killings and target killings of former government employees and members of security forces. Now we see Taliban very systematically reviewing social media pages of people and giving them calls if they're critical of the Taliban and threatening them, saying, remove this, don't do this ever again. If you do it, you'll be detained. And in fact, detaining people, holding them in detention and torturing them. And so what's the implications of the situation for what the EU Parliament can do and what the EU countries overall can do? What are some of the asks, as you earlier asked? We have to continue to stay engaged in Afghanistan. It's not an option. Not to engage is not an option, because 35 million people, over 35 million people, and more than half of them women, live there. But how should this engagement look like? That's where I think we should focus on. And if 2023, we are still talking just about the humanitarian crisis, we have failed. We have to move beyond that. And to move beyond that, we really have to think about liquidity crisis. We have to think about solutions to the banking situation without giving money to Taliban. And it's not going to be easy, but there are solutions being offered by experts. There should be political will to address those solutions, because no country can live on humanitarian aid. No one aspires to wake up and queue up to get food. People won't have income, they won't have dignity, they won't have an economy. And we need to address that. And it's going to be hard, because Taliban used force to come to power. They have terrorists in their ranks, they have terrorists in their cabinet. But we have to find ways. And there are ways. I don't think it's completely impossible, but we have to use this opportunity now to move beyond engaging and not engaging to how to engage and how to make sure that women and human rights is at the heart of that engagement as we move forward. Particularly the expectation from EU is that it will have a principled stance on this. Earlier, the MEP was talking about how it's challenging, because you have the needs of people, and also you have the principles. But I think if we abandon the principles entirely, then the implications are, of course, beyond Afghanistan.
And Annelise, you sat down with members of the Taliban. You interviewed them. Just tell our viewers, what was that like?
It's it's fascinating to hear Shahrazad as well, because it's precisely that, right? It's to keep Afghanistan in the headlines. My idea when I was there was to report as much as possible, to continue feeding the news cycle that is so hungry today, with as much information as I could, so that we could talk about Afghanistan, so we could engage people and interest people about what was happening in Afghanistan. And for that, yes, I went and asked to sit down with the Minister of Education. I literally went to, well, the first few days were a mess, as you described earlier, for lack of a better word. There were, nobody knew who was doing what. There was no government when I got there. The Taliban were all over the streets of Kabul, using the police cars, patrolling neighborhoods, but we had no idea who to ask for a statement. There was a spokesperson that emerged, someone that was hiding inside Kabul for so many years. Nobody knew that he really existed. It turned out that he existed, and he was then the one saying things on behalf of the group. But this is not at that point was not an organized structure of power. So literally, we had no idea who to ask questions to. Eventually, there was a government that betrayed the West, I would say, because they promised that there would be an engaging and a very plural government that would represent all Afghanistan. That was not true then, and it's not true today. There are only Taliban members in that government. There's no representatives of minorities, women. So I asked to interview the education minister, because at that time already we were talking about the education of girls. Now they're talking about potentially reopen universities for girls tomorrow. But again, we've heard that before many times. And I knocked on the door, and the deputy minister agreed to talk to me. And it was quite interesting, because as with other members of the group that I met throughout my days there, he didn't look at me. He agreed to answer my questions. But it was a very official line as to, yes, women have the right to education. But in what shape or form will that education take place? And once they get an education, can they then dream of getting a job? And can they be as important as men? All those questions remain unanswered today. And it doesn't matter who you ask, from the foot soldier in the streets, who sometimes speaks English, by the way, to a high-ranking official of their government. They still have a very particular view in terms of what they expect women's role to be. And as much makeup as we want to put in this story, and as much as we want to try to see their goodwill, because we need to engage with them, as we said. And that's why I was asking you about this fine line that the international community has to play. And I am very glad to listen to Shahrazad say that there are ways to engage with them, because it's very hard to know how to continue to engage with them, even as international media, even as journalists, because do you then go and ask them questions? Do you give them a voice in the platform? How do you continue reporting in Afghanistan without putting people's lives at risk? Because now we're confronted with this situation as to, I am confronted with that situation. I want to continue reporting. I want to continue traveling to Kabul and to other parts of Afghanistan. But how do you do that without then leaving people behind, people who say themselves have been abandoned by the international community? How do you leave them in the hands of a group that still says they are not responsible for the atrocities that are currently being committed as we speak? We're hearing about women activists in Mazar-e-Sharif being, their bodies showing up in hospitals riddled with bullets, and members that claim to be part of the Taliban calling people and harassing people because of their criticism. So how do you continue reporting? How do you continue helping? How do you continue negotiating with a group that is just
They won't even look you in the
so
eye
somber
when you do an interview? I mean, that is the reality here that we're dealing with. And as we speak here, I heard from one of your colleagues today, another nominee, that 5 journalists are currently have just been abducted in the last couple of days. So this is the reality that we're dealing with here. And Charles, I understand that members of the European Parliament have been looking into visiting The country, is that something that's on the cards? Would you be planning to visit? Because, as Zarifa said, you want help now. You want people to come and visit and speak to people and try and give them direct help now, and not talk about what they might be able to do in the future, but now that this is urgent.
I don't know what exactly the plans are to visit Afghanistan, but it must be done. For the time being, it's not very easy to travel, but nevertheless, we have to do our utmost in order to be present on the ground, to have conversations with people there, not only in the chicken street in Kabul, but everywhere in the country. It's important to go to those regions that are isolated from us, and they have no link, not a single link with us, with our countries, with our political authorities. Given the fact that the Taliban are in the driving seat, we must admit that they will do everything in order to prevent any interference in their internal, what they call internal affairs. But nevertheless, we must overcome this situation by taking or putting into place the best diplomacy possible in order to be there. And we are in a humble situation. We go there and we ask them if they allow us to help them. I think it's very difficult to convince them by referring to the universal character of human rights. I don't think that they are deeply impressed by that. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, we have to act in a way that the discussion, the conversation channels remain open. Mm-hmm. That we, together with the United Nations institutions and the NGOs, accept it on the ground, that we can help them in order to channel our messages, our help through those rare possibilities. And we have to do it again and again in order to be very brief. Yeah. We know what must be done, but it's difficult to do it.
Shahrazad, I'll just bring you in there and I'll come to Annelise. Big talk.
I'll keep it quick. I think we have to be very clear. The international community has to be very clear-eyed about what Taliban want. Do Taliban want anything from the international community? They do. It's true that you're negotiating access for humanitarian aid, but Taliban also, they want money. They talk about it every day on media. They want international assistance, they want development assistance, they want recognition. We are not in a helpless situation. The international community is not a helpless situation. It has some leverage. So I think we have to be clear-eyed about that. We have to also be very clear and frank in our conversations with Taliban to tell them, the international community is not here to impose their values on you. What we are asking you is, because we are here to help your people, you have to listen to your people. Listen to your own journalists. Listen to your own women. Don't listen to us. Don't care if we want the girls' schools open, but your own communities want the girls' schools open. Ethnic minorities want to be part of the government. This is not some European saying this. This is the ethnic groups in Afghanistan saying this. Listen to them. If you want us to help you, to help your people, you have to listen to your people.
So they're shooting themselves in the foot.
That means money against human rights violations. Do you think it works?
Sorry?
Do you think it can work? I hope so. I hope so. Because when they are really in need of money, then they have to listen to us. And that's the moment where we can elaborate the right conditions.
No, but they certainly are in need of money.
They are in need of money. But it's not only about of course, humanitarian aid has to be unconditional. Absolutely. Humanitarian aid needs to be...
But development is...
Development aid is different. They are asking you for salaries for teachers, aren't they? Yeah. So you tell them, we pay you salaries for teachers, but we start with a province where girls are going to school. Exactly. Otherwise, sorry, Taliban are claiming that they have increased revenue compared to the past government from customs because they are less corrupt. Where is this revenue going? As an Afghan citizen, where is this revenue being spent that Taliban are gathering, collecting from the customs? They're taxing communities. Where is the money from these taxes going? They can pay salaries through that money if they're unwilling to let girls to school. We have to treat Taliban as adults. They are adults. They made the decision to take the country by force. They have to see the consequence of that decision. And they have agency. They can't just be like, we are helpless, we are going to starve the population. You have to continuously...
You can be sure that that will be done once the conditions, a little bit of conditions are fulfilled to do so.
Yes.
The only issue that I have with that is that we're 6 months into this now. And
it's getting worse.
And we're in the middle of winter, and people are freezing and starving, and there are reports of women selling their kidneys and children to be able to feed the others. And the fact of the matter is, we're still trying to find a solution to. It feels as though here we're way too comfortable. And too far removed from what's happening on the ground. And what you said before about going there, I think that's key. I think for politicians, it's not that difficult. You can take a plane and actually get there. And there are flights, commercial flights, and you can book it online. And once you land there and you walk around the street, you don't need an official invitation from the Taliban as far as I'm concerned. You can land, you can go visit Sherzad's family, for example. And then you see for yourself, and that feels completely different from just talking about the theory of what it feels like, what it may feel like to be cold and hungry. And I think if European members of parliament would be willing to do that, I think the Taliban would behave in a very different way as well.
Yeah.
I am very supportive to that.
Well, let's see if it happens.
Just adding a short comment on that. Exactly. If you're taking them accountable to what they are doing, like let's tell them directly. When you are still in the process of negotiation with them, tell them directly in first of ever meeting after this 2 days that we are here and talking the debates, just please tell them, okay, we will give you money, or maybe, as Sherzad said, the salaries for teachers, but starting from the province where the girls are able to go to school. Mm-hmm. We will help you doing this, but doing that needs you to pay a price for that. Secondly, and most importantly, I also believe that it's like 6 months. Taliban are easily able to come to Norway with so many high-profile protocols. So it means that, like, the topic of discussion is like kind of for us, when Taliban can come and have all the government, all the country within a week. So now it's 6 months, we are still not done with the negotiation, and we are still and people are dying, selling their kids, body parts. Is something that needs to be changed. Let's let's change the platform from talking, discussions, putting, stuff to media, to directly action. And okay, you people may have time, but we don't. Why we as Afghans, we are directly saying this to international community, because Afghanistan's failure was not only Afghans' responsibility. It was joint failure. It was joint, the fall of Afghanistan was joint fall for everyone. And whatever Afghan women are striving for in Afghanistan, trust me, it's a big, I'm really sorry to say that, but it's a big shame, and it will remain a big shame for entire history into the foreheads of all those people who are carrying the slogans of fighting for women's rights and in their own societies and countries, but being involved in Afghanistan, they could do anything better, at least in a time where women of Afghanistan really needed it. So let's start acting on that.
Let's start acting, and the momentum is there now with Roberta Metsola, the new president here at the European Parliament, saying today that you can count on the European Parliament, that the European Parliament is here to help. So maybe this trip could be feasible and more like hands-on support.
I fully agree with what you have just said. I used to be Minister of Development Cooperation, and I had programs together with Afghanistan, and it worked. I refer to the time just after the American bombings. Together with Mrs. Obaid from the UNFPA, we launched the first census in order to prepare elections. Then it was possible to do something, because we have a counterpart discussing with us. But today it's more difficult, and the most difficult situation where you can be as Minister of Development Cooperation or as Commissioner responsible for development is when your counterpart doesn't agree to discuss with you the fundamental problems. That's the most difficult period you can pass through when you are in responsibility. And that's very disappointing, and it's really frustrating. But nevertheless, it's not a reason not to try to overcome the situation. We have to do our utmost. Once again, we have to do everything which is in our possibilities to do that.
And as Annelise said earlier, you're far too comfortable here in Brussels. I mean,
it's please,
it's
I'm not singling
you're not
you
the
out.
European Union, by the
yes,
way.
but it is interesting when I came here today, and it's it's a commendable initiative to have this topic brought here, and so that these men and women of power can listen to your voices. You are now the ones that can still speak on behalf of your people, and that is crucial, obviously, for the international community. As I was saying, one of our conundrums right now is how do we report and how do we keep Afghanistan in the headlines without putting people at risk? And you are part of that answer. But it's interesting because politicians, and I get a lot of that, the language is very important for diplomacy. So we are very concerned. We are going to do everything in our power. But then once you're in Kabul and you see, and I've never seen anything like it in my short years reporting from the field, and I've seen crisis, and I've been in war zone, different war zone sites. I've never seen what I've seen in Afghanistan, and I know that things are getting much harder now. So sometimes I think, as you were saying, I don't think that the words are enough anymore. I think it's been 6 months, and I think there needs to be some sort of action. And I don't know, maybe the action is just a visit. It's a group of politicians that show up in Kabul and just go for a cafe. There are restaurants, there are hotels, there are everything.
Yes. We are in discussion with the Commission on that. Let me say in very simple words. I do not feel guilty, but I feel responsible as long as we cannot overcome the situation. We have to prepare ways allowing us to act in the way expected by Afghan people.
I think guilt is not the word, but I think we're all as a society responsible. And I think as journalists and as members of the civil society in Afghanistan, I think it's crucial that we don't forget Afghanistan.
We don't forget. And if anyone listening or watching here today would like to comment, you can comment here underneath our YouTube video and our Facebook live feed as well. But you were going to add something there?
Yeah, I want to add something so important. If we are going to focus back and start big projects or small projects or whatever, humanitarian aid or whatever else back to Afghanistan, please keep in mind, Afghanistan is not only these big cities that you colleagues or maybe workers or maybe employees are able to go. We have so many districts that all 20 years, they never know we had this woman, and I have met this woman that they never know that they have a president and a republic government and constitution, and then rights within that constitution. So please focus on the countryside. Please focus on the basic needs of the society, and please let's focus on reaching the ground needs of the community. And yeah, I will add something on the point of how to do it. Like we are ready to act, but how to act? Like it's so easy. Nowadays Taliban are just asking for releasing of assets. You need to just clear that. Okay, we will release that, but these are some points you need to guarantee that.
Before going there, it's very helpful to have an exchange of views with you, because you know the situation there.
Thank you so much.
Charles, you're a politician. Do your voters support this? Would they support your trip? Are they worried about Afghanistan? Are they worried about women's rights in Afghanistan? Is that something that concerns voters in Luxembourg?
Of course, that concerns everybody. It's a catastrophe to see to what extent people's rights are denied since the withdrawal from NATO and the Western states from Afghanistan.
But if people were concerned, would we not have more policies in Europe then to welcome people and bring more people over?
People are concerned because this is a failure of the policy launched in Afghanistan since 2000, since after the attacks on the World Trade Center. I think the basic error made then was that there were no clear defined objectives before going there. And that's a basic principle. You have to know why you are there. For security reasons, of course. For development reasons, of course. But then you have to say that. And you need a plan together with the international community in order to show the people that you are there, not for reasons linked to invasion. Or we have no territorial requests to Afghanistan. Nothing. We are there for helping people there. And it's my political activities that I am summing up in this. My political duty is to stay on the side of the weak, to stay on the side of the vulnerable people. That's the reason why I was engaged, and I'm still engaged in development matters, humanitarian action, and I assumed at the same time the function of Minister of Defense. I was in a double function present in Afghanistan between 2000 and 2004. And I think we could have been more successful there if we had clearly defined objectives.
Yeah.
And I think that the objectives were not well understood by most of the Afghan people. If that were the case, we would be in a quite different situation today.
And I want to ask you, you're based in Germany now. Do you feel welcome in Germany? Do you see your future in Germany, or?
Actually, nowhere can be your home. Trying so hard when it comes to my country and home, I'm hardly trying to keep my tears into my eyes, because I miss my country. I miss the smell of its dust. I miss the smell of its, like, whatever, maybe the garbage, but I miss it. And yeah, I feel so thankful, and I'm really grateful of how I and my family and maybe many more refugees was welcomed to Germany, and the government treated so perfectly, and I'm really happy with that. But yeah, nowhere can be your home. So I still have the nightmares, and I'm still not able to sleep properly. I'm still not able to eat properly. I know that only today I just had a small lunch since maybe more than 24 hours, because last Saturday also I didn't have anything. It's not because I'm not able to eat something or have something, but it's just because I'm going through a very bad situation personally. And but carrying all this, the only thing that I am able to do is going everyone, at least doing my own part to my own people and country, so at least when it comes to tomorrow, and when anybody asks me for Afghanistan situation, I can tell them that, yeah, I did my part. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And look at you here, a nominee for the Sakharov Prize 2021. Not bad. You haven't been wasting your time at such a young age, so you should be very proud of yourself.
Actually, I can say that I'm proud of myself, because if I was really someone worth of this big stuff, so I was not refugee right now. Maybe, yeah, because when it comes to Afghanistan, trust me, I blame everyone from myself to my father and back to myself. Everyone. My father was murdered by Taliban just in front of our house. And the dead body of my dad was carried by my mom from hospital to hospital. So I know how it feels, but it's like I failed, helping that evil situation. I think maybe I couldn't raise my voice the right time that I needed. So yeah, I can't be much proud of myself, but yeah, I'm much more proud of those old ladies nowadays standing inside Afghanistan, and trust me, I feel so broken and like kind of ashamed of myself that I'm not one of them, and I'm not a voice just standing by the side of them, and it's something that always breaks me into the pieces, and maybe one of the reasons that I'm not able to sleep and eat and rest is also that one. So I will be much proud of myself if I could return back home and I could be part of any kind of development inside my country. Doesn't matter what, small or big, but if I could be there.
And you? We heard today Angelina Jolie. She mentioned your names here in the European Parliament, speaking directly to you, commending your bravery, saying, learn their names, listen to their stories.
I think there is, as Zarifa also shared, there's a collective sense of guilt, of failure, of pain. Afghans are grappling with a lot of pain, especially Afghans who are trying to be at the forefront of social and development change. Earlier, we heard reflections from you, but there's a lot of reflection going on in the Afghan community as well. And for the human rights community, we keep asking what assumptions we got wrong, what could have been done better, where we failed and where we succeeded, what's the responsibility of the Afghan political elite, what's the responsibility of the Afghan human rights community. And yes, we're putting a lot here on EU, but I do want to say that that doesn't mean that we are asking everything. We are asking for everything from you. There are women in Afghanistan risking their lives every day to change the situation. There are journalists in Afghanistan every day. We are not just victims. They are trying to have agency and change the situation themselves, risking their lives. Journalists risking their lives, Afghan journalists, Afghan defenders, former government officials, and the Afghan community in exile, the women's community in exile, despite the immense grief and loss and pain they are struggling with because their whole lives, their plans, their careers, their future, everything they built was lost. They are trying to find a way to help their own people so that we are not so dependent, because it's not easy to ask for help. You know, Afghans are proud people. Every time I ask for help, I feel so ashamed because I think, why are we in this position again and again? And I think that's important to recognize that we know our own agency and we are trying to be part of the solution.
And this guilt, Annelise, palpable as well among the media, among members of the press who have moved on. Their eyes have moved on to other stories.
Very much so. It breaks my heart to hear and to talk to people in Afghanistan today who say that they are hopeless and that they have no idea how to move forward. And what is the world doing? It's a very hard question, and I'm still determined to keep Afghanistan as a very important story and to keep telling that story and to keep reminding the world of your stories and of your names and the important work that you do and that you want to continue to do for your country. And perhaps more important than all, to remind the world that you're not refugees, you're much more than that. I think there are these two stories that need to continue to be told, not only about people who are left, but also of the people that are out of Afghanistan, but still represent very much the country that they come from. It's very hard to fight the tears as well. I cannot imagine your pain, but it's very humbling to sit here and to listen to what you both went through and are still going through today. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Annelise. We look forward to watching your documentary, Daughters of Afghanistan, which will be out very soon on Euronews. And Charles Gruen, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll keep an eye on what comes out of today, of the Afghan Women's Day. And if that trip goes ahead, we'll keep an eye, we'll stay in touch. And Zarifa and Shahrzad, thank you so much for joining us here on Euronews. Thank you for being in Brussels. Mind yourselves, take care, and stay in touch.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that brings this to an end. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye.